please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have this is going to be a new, beginning this, at this meeting of doing our agenda via consent. It's going to be what they call consent agenda. I feel premature in mentioning that, other than, it didn't mention public comments. And public comments, agenda items only. Any topic related to the agenda may be addressed except for personnel or specific student issues. School board encourages public participation at its meetings to allow for efficiency in conducting meetings and to give each speaker a fair opportunity to present his or her views. The following shall apply to the public speaking portion of the agenda. Each speaker shall state their name. Any questions or concerns be submitted in writing with speaker's contact information, name, address, phone number. Each speaker shall be limited to a time approximately 10 minutes, which that number happens to be agreed upon by the board. The board will not permit discussion involving individual personnel or students. There are door remarks through the chair. Community members may not poll individual board members or debate other community members in attendance. Okay, on the consent agenda, I would like to go items A through C.
Did we ask if there were any public comments on the agenda?
I didn't ask for actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, let's go with, is there any public comments right now on the agenda? Okay. Things are different right now, so again, thank you for your patience. All right, so A through C, right?
Yes.
You said, exactly. All right, can I have a motion, please? Sue and Camille. Is there any board members that would like to have any discussion on any of the items within that block we just addressed?
Yeah, question on number 6. I thought for grant-funded positions that are year to year, because it's contingent upon a grant, that those appointments, since they're year to year, don't qualify for, you don't have to identify a tenure period, right? Are there any other, aside from number 6, are there any other grant-funded positions in this particular set?
Oh, he is not grant funded, he's replacing it. You're right, I forgot.
He's a replacement of a resignation.
Right. The name is below this
Yeah, the
appointment.
other two, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Right, and this is just an amendment to the start date, because he had to honor his previous contract.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
One quick question on number 5. I know in the past we were always asking for backup to the time that mentors have performed their duties to mentoring new staff members. How do we track the time they put in with the staff members?
That's actually tracked through, we used to call it My Learning Plan, but now it's Frontline.
you still call it my learning.
Yes,
You do.
My Learning Plan. So they need to enter their hours on a monthly basis, and that is,
There's a
managed
lot there.
by the
Mentor
mentor
law,
coordinator.
mentee.
Because we need to prove to the state that they've had mentoring experience, plus they have a 1 hour meeting once a month where they all come together as well. So they have time each week, and then the 1 hour where everyone is together as well.
Okay. It just seems like we have a lot more names this year than we
We
had.
have a lot more new
Hires.
hires. We hired 20-some people.
That's a big amount.
Also on it, number 6, that individual there, the dates for the probationary period. Did we get an answer on that as far as September 20th and
Yes,
September
that
19th?
is a shortened tenure, it's not 4 years, it's 3.
Right,
Three,
and that
but
date is
And
correct.
the date is correct.
The date is
Yes,
correct?
I did
Okay.
verify that with the secretary.
All right. All right, but that's obviously, yeah, okay, we're good. Any other questions or discussions on the items within that block that we're voting on? You good? Well, okay, all in favor? Anybody opposed? No?
I am an aye on all the items except number 6, I'm a no on that.
Number 6.
Yeah.
We gotta pull it out. We have to
You've
pull
got to
it
pull
out.
it out and vote on it separately.
Right.
Do whatever you need to do.
So we'll redo this, and it's gonna be on the block that we discussed minus item 6.
Right.
Item 6, we will vote on that separately. So again, all in favor of block as we described it, minus that item.
Aye.
Ed, Al?
Aye.
Okay. That's 7-0 on that, and we're gonna vote separately on item 6. Okay,
You need a separate motion for
yes, so now you have a motion for Mike and Heather. Okay, and be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approves the amended appointment as presented to the board at this meeting. Can I have a motion? Ed,
Had the motion.
Camille?
Yeah, Mike, you did already.
Oh, yeah, sorry, you got it, thank you. Again, this is a little mixed up here. All right, do we have any more discussion on that? We good? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, my no.
You're opposed? Okay.
I was
All
opposed.
opposed.
So 5, 6, 1.
6-1.
Thank you.
6-1, thank you. Okay. Business and operations. That's
Nope,
on there.
that's-
First thing, again,
Forward to Assistant Superintendent's.
I love
All
it.
right.
Assistant Superintendent comments. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, well, we have lots of updates for you. The first and one that is probably on, well, maybe not on non-educators' minds, but just a few updates on our COVID plans and things we put in place. What's coming around to you right now will be posted on our district website tomorrow. I'm not going to go through it page by page, but this is many of our safety items put in place for COVID. The most, I'm just going to pick out some of the highlights. Some of this is the same as it was last year, but we just updated it. Just like last year, masks need to be worn inside the school buildings by all individuals, whether they're adults or students. In outdoor settings, students or people do not need to wear a mask, so when they leave the building, they can take the mask off, but in the building, they need to have masks on at all times. The mask needs to cover your nose and your mouth, as it has through this whole thing. One of the big changes from last year is social distancing, and especially social distancing in classrooms. The new guidance from New York State Department of Health, which we just received September 2nd, so last Thursday night, was the updated guidance, but also from the Centers for Disease Control, as well as from the American Academy of Pediatrics. They are prioritizing 5 days of in-person instruction over all other, except for mask wearing, mitigation strategies. So nothing that we do to mitigate COVID should prevent students from coming into school 5 days a week. So what they recommend is that you have multiple strategies when you can't reach kind of the gold standard of separation, social distancing, that kind of thing. So again, our baseline mitigation measure is our masks. And then they do advocate that students practice 3 feet of social distancing, a minimum, when possible. We're trying to do that to the extent that we can. We do have some places where 3 feet is not possible. Most of those are happening in high school or middle school classrooms, where, like one particular period where there might be a lot of students in that period. But for the most part, we hit that 3-foot distancing in most classrooms. Adults are still supposed to maintain 6-foot distancing between other adults, but also between students and adults. Again, we're advocating that to the best that we can. The one time in the day where students are allowed to take off their masks beyond short mask breaks that teachers monitor would be during lunch periods. Students are sitting in the lunchroom, less than 6-foot distance, while they have, and they take their mask off only while eating. So they have their mask on while they're in line, they have their mask on while they're getting themselves organized, they eat, and then they put their mask back on as soon as they're done eating. Again, trying to put multiple mitigation levels in. We did keep the plastic dividers in the cafeterias at the tables. And when we're looking at contact tracing and quarantining, it's usually 10 to 15 minutes, depending on whether you talk to Ulster County Department of Health or the guidance from the CDC, of contact without masks. In most situations, students will not have their masks off for more than 10 minutes, even when they're eating. So we're hoping that that's going to cut down on the number of people that will need to quarantine. As far as contact tracing goes, as I mentioned, the standard is really that 10 to 15 minutes of exposure or more, and that can be over a 24-hour period, so it could be 3 5-minute exposures across the day. Those who are vaccinated, if they have exposure, as long as they're not showing symptoms, they do not need to quarantine. So our students who are 12 and up and adults who are vaccinated, there's less likelihood that they would need to quarantine, unless they start to show symptoms. For those who are unvaccinated, which of course is our youngest population, our elementary school students, if they are exposed, and especially if they're unmasked, there's a higher chance that they might need to quarantine. So we're really trying to manage that the best that we can. Quarantine is still 10 days if it's full-on exposure, still 10 days quarantine. You cannot, if you're unvaccinated and you are unmasked, you cannot come back before that 10 days, even if you have a negative test. We're in constant communication with Ulster County Department of Health. They actually have a person who's dedicated to schools that we work with every time we have a situation where there's a COVID positive case. We did have some questions about transportation. That's the other area where we are not meeting the social distancing guidelines. There are, in most cases, probably 2 students to a seat. One way that there's more mitigation, again, masks the whole time. I don't know how many of you have been in a school bus lately, but the seats are very high. I almost can't see over the top of them if I'm sitting in them and I'm on the taller side. So I think that really will limit, to the student who might be sitting next to them, possibly the student across the aisle, as far as quarantine goes. So that won't be a situation where we'll have to quarantine an entire bus if there is exposure. as far as my understanding at this point in time. Now, any of this is subject to change at any moment, given direction from Ulster County or New York State.
Can I just ask
Sure.
a question? So I'm assuming on the bus and in the cafeterias, they're doing assigned seating so that they know who's sitting where, if there's
Yes.
the need? Okay.
Yes, especially with our youngest students. In fact, the elementary school, they have the seats numbered, and the students know, what number they go to and that kind of thing. And we have, at the high school, as well as to a limited extent at the middle school, we place some tables outside. We have some tables in the hallway at the high school because there's more space there. So, we're trying to do everything we can to spread people out as much as we can. I think a couple of weeks we'll have a better feeling for how all of this mitigation is working. So the other big news in the COVID world for schools, again on September 2nd, we received a letter from the New York State Department of Health mandated COVID screening of unvaccinated employees in the buildings on a weekly basis. So we sent out, I believe I copied the Board of Ed on the note that I sent out to all employees, that also went out in a school messenger to all employees to their personal emails as well this evening. All employees have the opportunity to be tested weekly if they choose. If they would rather not have that happen and they are vaccinated, they need to bring proof of their vaccination to the health office for their building. They'll be put on a list, and then they won't have to go through the weekly testing. If a person is not unvaccinated, there is no exception to the weekly testing at all. We are working with the Ulster County Department of Health to work through the logistics of that. From our understanding of meeting with Mark Ryder on last Friday, and we're meeting with him again this Friday, Ulster County will be supplying the tests and will be supplying the personnel to administer the tests. So, and the test will be done on site. But what the part we need to figure out now from him, we had to get a number so we know how many people we will be testing on a weekly basis. And then our vision of it, now whether that will be matched by Ulster County or not, we're not positive. Our vision would be we'd have one person in each building that would be administering the test. I believe they are the Vinex, the quick test, although it still is a nasal. It's not whatever the other test is called. So we'll have more details on that once we know a number, so we can talk to him and work out the logistics. So the other part of that testing is in areas of low, moderate, or high spread, which means anywhere in New York State. We do have to offer testing to unvaccinated students as well. That one is voluntary, so parents will opt into that program rather than opt out. And so tomorrow we'll be sending home school messenger, we'll put it on social media, we're creating a form that parents will be able to, it's essentially a permission slip that parents will be able to submit for their students to have the weekly testing as well. I can't stress enough, vaccination is one of the best ways to mitigate the spread of COVID-19.
Confidentiality is out the window.
No, no.
Because when people see the same staff member.
Well, any staff member can
Yes,
choose,
yes.
any staff member can choose to participate in the weekly testing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a person who is being tested is or is not vaccinated.
It's pretty apparent, though.
Well, I will also say, whatever that information, it won't be coming from us, but if a person is choosing to share that information, that's a decision that they've made. We're gonna try to do something that's a little bit more confidential, but truthfully, I'm not sure how we can do that in a way, that makes it completely confidential. But as far as who's going to see this information, it will be our health office people and probably me.
No, and that's fine, I'm fine with
Yeah,
that.
no.
I'm just
No, and,
looking forward towards the
I was-
challenges that are gonna happen.
absolutely, and it's, the other part of it that, when you think of the fact that we're going to be testing however many people each week, that means we're going to probably have more COVID positive people. So that will lead to more contact tracing and more quarantining.
Staff members will be asked to do that testing during a break?
That's what we need to work out.
That would be logistics.
I can't really give an answer to that until we understand what the county is willing to provide and how much time.
Do we have percentages, what the percentage number of our staff?
I do not, that's what we're going to be getting from this, because as you mentioned, you know, it's all voluntary, whether
Actually,
people,
even student-wise, down to age 12, right?
down to age 12. So, you know, if we go by just county-wide numbers, generally speaking, in Ulster County, 61% of adults are vaccinated. I would say we're probably higher than that, just from anecdotal information that I know. Student-wise, in New York State, the last I saw was about 45 to 50% of students between the age of 12 and up were vaccinated. So we're probably around there. Again, anecdotally, it does seem that there are a lot of students who have been vaccinated. That information we won't necessarily get because, again, parents are opting into it. So, you know, and we can't ask, at this point in time, we can't ask them their status. But I do know a lot of students have done it, and even, you know, looking at some of our, what we know about some of our athletic teams, it looked like a high percentage of those students were vaccinated. So, you know, you can extrapolate that out, maybe. But actually, I've been pretty proud of our staff overall. I think that they, early on, made a real commitment to being vaccinated, and there's lots of reasons why people choose not to as well. But people need to understand that if they're not, they're going to have to quarantine for a longer period of time. Because if you're unvaccinated and you have exposure, even if you're wearing masks, you're quarantining.
For the time being, buses will be riding with the windows open.
Yes, and we did that all last year as well.
And within the classroom, we're not having screening anymore or on the desks.
We do not have the plastic dividers on the desk, no. It was one of those things that, in a lot of ways, was more of a hindrance to education than not. It was actually hard to see through them, or see through 3 layers of them.
We talked about the plastic dividers really were for when they were eating
Yeah.
last year, and then, you know,
We all
the
know.
folks are like, well, wouldn't it be great if they were
Plastic.
everywhere? Well, you know what? It was not so great.
No, I know.
Not
I
for
know.
education,
I saw it in action, or inaction.
The other thing to Sarah's point with those letters that are going home to families and to our staff, there is a link to the Ulster County site to sign up to get vaccinated. The site will be opening back up at the Best Buy location in Kingston. I brought it up to Mark Ryder a couple of weeks ago, and I brought it up again in the video chat that we were in the other day about doing a remote site in the southern part of the county, and he's all for that, but he needs commitment that folks down here would actually take them up on it. They've done mobile sites in other locations, and they've gotten 3 to 8 people. Now, that's 3 to 8 more people than we wouldn't have had if we didn't do it. But, so once this gets up and going, that our goal is to get a survey out to the locals, and I mentioned it at Rotary this morning, to help get the word out and get a mobile site down here to make it more convenient for folks. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And when I clicked on that, the Ulster County site, the most, he said the closest appointments that I noticed on there were the 10th of September, which is what, 2 days from now. So, you know, they're definitely available. Anyone that's interested, you can definitely find it. It's on the Ulster County COVID, I think it's COVID vaccination. Ulster County, yeah, I don't remember what the full title of it is. So you know, we'll keep you posted on that. You know, I anticipate that we probably won't start the weekly testing, maybe by the end of last week or next week, but that would be pretty quick to get it all in place. But I would expect that by the following week, we should have things in place to get things going, especially for the adults.
Is there a requirement, or is it just as soon as possible?
Well, the guidance says immediately. But, you know, there are, and you know, we're a small district. So bigger districts, it's going to be a lot. You know, so I do think they seem very committed to getting it going. And we talked to him Friday, and the information had just come through Thursday, so, you know, it does take a little bit of time to get this all straightened out. And I really have no idea how many parents will want to participate in that program. You know, given the way numbers are going and the number of students who are being impacted this time, it might be a higher number. Okay, so that's COVID. Any other questions or anything that people have had? Yeah.
For the students that are quarantined, the idea is that they're quarantined when they log into their classes at all grade levels, or?
6 through 12, because it works on a period by period basis. It's a little easier to do that. For the elementary school, the way we kind of finished the year last year is they worked directly with the teacher through their Seesaw or Schoology site, and then there was some more interaction with the teacher, just because in elementary classroom, you don't really get that experience if you're zooming in. So that's where we are with that.
And then with the water fountains,
Yes.
they're turned off, so getting water, will it be jugs or?
They do have access to water, yes. And certainly if you have any other, as you take time to really go through it, if you have other questions, let me know. A lot of it is similar to last
You
year.
said kids that do have access to water?
Yes.
Yes.
So if I want to refill my bottle, where would I go in this building?
In this building, I have to ask, I don't know.
There's a cooler in the front lobby,
Okay.
right by the front doors, there was a cooler set up. And there might have been other ones throughout, but that one I know.
Similar with the middle school?
The middle school had one in the lobby as well. The elementary school, most of the classrooms have the water in the room,
Water
and the
fountains.
teachers were being asked to fill those bottles so that the students weren't cross-contaminating.
Thank you.
Well, we actually, for the water fountains, the Educational Foundation has given funding to put in the water bottle refilling stations. What we found and what is part of the American Rescue Plan money, our grant money, is the inserts are very affordable and easy. The plumbing to support the inserts is not so much. And so part of that, we need to do some plumbing to make it so that those things work. So that's in the works. We're gonna have that happen. It doesn't need to be in the next building project. It's going to be happening within the next year. It'll be an insurance, yes. Yes, it'll be swapped out from the old one. Yeah. Absolutely, and every child, I mean, so many water bottles.
I really can't give questions that well.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. No, my question was that ensuring that fountains get swapped out properly via the funds that we have to make every one of them water bottle capable.
Yes.
The water bottle
With that
refilling.
rescue money, right? I think that was
Yeah,
all
that's
that.
what,
exactly.
we need to redo the plumbing.
Oh, sorry about
But is
that.
it,
No, that's all right.
I would assume it's just those are all single line, they should have shut off each one, so
I could
Some of the
not
older
tell
ones
you
don't
anything
have.
about this. I just know that
You don't know about those.
Mr. Miller came and said
Fixture.
that we need to do some sort of plumbing to support
Right.
whatever they need.
Some will.
Yeah.
PVC type stuff, even if it's
Okay, so that was COVID. The other update I would like to give you is the rec committee, the equity committee. Our first district-wide meeting will be September 28th at 6 p.m. Here, hopefully in the library, given all COVID things. But one conversation that has come up, that came up towards the end of the year, and also in conversation with teachers as we move into this school year, is we would really like to expand the representation on our direct committee, so that we can have a little bit more representation from faculty as well as from parents. Currently, we have one parent member from each building, one faculty member from each building, one HSA member from each building. And I think, we were trying to keep it smaller so that it's a little bit more manageable, but over the last year, we found that made it harder to really get a cross-section of perspectives on the committee. So that there's two different directions we're going to go. We really are going to look this year at creating building level committees that would be, kind of advising the bigger district committee, but we also would like to expand the membership on that larger committee. So most of the members from last year wanted to stay for this year as well, but we would like to put put applications out to see if we can get some new members as well. So I just kind of wanted to let you know and make sure that that's a good direction that
This
people
is
want.
the equity committee?
For the equity committee, correct. Yes.
What's the date on that
And
here?
there's subcommittee.
September 28th. And we're planning to send something out for that soon, just to remind people of what the date is, but,
We have to wait.
so, we're all good with that? We'll put the applications out there so that maybe then we can have them for the next board meeting for people to look at as well. Okay? And the only other last thing I had was, we had great 2 superintendent's conference days to start the new school year. I think I copied you on the email, but just in case, I forgot to push color for your print, so it looks prettier.
Save money.
It's actually the same on the copy sheet.
So, we started the day, we had meant to have our big, everyone into the auditorium, welcome back in person like we normally did, but given COVID numbers, we went Zoom for those big early meetings. And we hadn't expected to, but we did start off with our COVID protocols for 2021, just going through all of that with teachers. And then Mr. Freer did his welcome, and then we had traditional mandated training, sexual harassment prevention, and a DASA refresher from our district council. Our various bargaining units had opportunities to meet, and then again, more mandated training. This was online through NICER, bloodborne pathogens, right to know. We actually need to catch a few of our HSA members up on that one because they were going to do it as a group, and that day the NICER was down. They had some glitch with their program.
Yeah.
So we need to catch a couple of people up there. Other than that, transportation had their 3-hour refresher courses. The buildings had their department meetings and other kinds of meetings in the afternoon. The next day, Dr. LeBlanc, who is our facilitator and contractor with our district equity team, he presented to each of our kind of constituent groups as well as each building. And really what he did is a lot of he updated our buildings and groups on the work that the direct committee did last year, and just really talked about what the work we're doing is, what the work we're not doing, what our goal is, and ultimately that's that we want all of our students to feel welcome and supported in our buildings. We want to make sure that our students feel represented when they're here and that they have a voice in what's happening. So he did that for all of our transportation, food service, secretarial staff, teaching staff, everyone across the board. And it was very well received. I sat through, I think, half of the meeting, or half of the presentations. There was a lot of good Q&A, got some good feedback, from especially, I hear from teachers a lot, but it was really good to hear from our transportation department, our food service people. They see the students in a different environment than our teachers do, a little bit more unstructured. They see and hear more, and it was good to have them give us some feedback. A few of the people were interested in being on the committee, so I think overall that was a good day. And then, of course, each of the buildings had their own team building and beginning of the year presentations. Those were separate agendas, but and at the end of the day, like I said, we had 22 new teachers alone that we hired this summer. So we did a meet and greet between the teachers and their mentors to kick off that program and get them started. So it was, as always, a full couple of days, and there were a lot of teachers in the buildings on Friday as well, kind of getting their classrooms ready and getting themselves organized to start yesterday, I guess, right? It was the first day for students. So overall, a great start to the year. And I'll let Mr. Freer talk more about about
All right,
that.
well, before I move into my report, I failed to, Mr. President, acknowledge one of our new hires who came out this evening. So Morgan Dennett is with us. She is the science lead replacement at the middle school. So we wanted to welcome Morgan to our district and thank her for being here this evening. So she'll be here with us from September through January of 2022.
Thank you.
Just one other acknowledgement on the agenda. We do have a retiree, Karen Rogner, will be retiring at the end of this month, just in a couple of days actually, and she's been with us for 22 years at the middle school as an aide, and she's been invaluable working in our library over the years and helping wherever help is needed at the middle school. So just congratulations to Karen and wish her very well in her retirement. All right. So as Sarah talked about the opening days with staff, opening days with students were those exhilarating days that we all look forward to. Life came back to our buildings. The 3 district administrators made sure that we went to each of the buildings. We welcomed students off the buses, welcomed parents, and students as they came through the car rider lines. And as with every first day, there's always some traffic, and so we experienced that both the elementary and the middle school. There were quite a few car riders on those days. I spoke to Mr. Darling and to Mrs. Coburn today, that those numbers have decreased slightly, but there's still a large car rider population in both of those buildings. I wish I could say there were smiling faces, but we could see smiling eyes. As we walked through all the buildings, it was great to hear the laughter and at the high school level, you could hear that they were so thankful to be back with their friends that they've been away from for a number of years, also at the middle school and the elementary school. We'll see those kindergartners coming in, skipping down the sidewalk. Town of Lloyd Police was on site at the elementary school. They were there to welcome students as well and offer some support with some of the traffic that we experienced down there. So it was a nice day. The weather was beautiful, so we got to spend some time outside on the sidewalks meeting students as they were coming in. And then we toured the buildings. We got to see teachers in action and students back in the classrooms, lunchrooms, a buzz. And everyone getting back to a sense of normalcy. Not the normal that we would hope for, but a normalcy that we haven't seen in a while. So it was great to see. So today is day 5 for me on the job as the superintendent. So it's been a busy couple of days. Not that the weeks leading up to it weren't busy as well, but I will let you know that I did attend Rotary a few weeks ago, and I showed up this morning at Rotary and was greeted with, "What are you doing here? We weren't expecting you yet." So I thought it was important that Rotary hear from us that we do value what they do for our schools, and to let them know that we had a great opening. I also reminded them that buses are on the road and the red lights mean don't go around buses. Not that Rotary typically needs to have that that acknowledgement, but I'm told that I will be installed as a member next Wednesday morning at the diner at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm meeting with the Rotary officials on Monday, so that's in the works. They've got a lot of great events coming up, and I'll make sure that I keep you apprised of all of those, and hope that we can get support for the Highland Rotary. I sent something out to all of you in the email over the weekend, I believe it was, or the days are all running together, so this might have been just the other day, but New York State School Boards Association convention is coming up in October, and if anyone is interested in attending that, it's down in New York City. We would like to get that registration in before the registration prices go up. So I know, Sue, you've mentioned that you were interested, maybe not the whole time, but
It's on the miscellaneous too.
yeah, if anyone's interested in that, please make sure that I can get that information to Carly. And then This came across our desks today. I guess it arrived here sometime over the summer, but as I'm going through materials, I found that on Monday, we have been invited to SUNY New Paltz as part of the Benjamin Center and the work with Assemblyman Cahill. And this is a Science Lab initiative. This has been in multiple rounds. Kingston City Schools were announced to see, or they got funding for a third round of the program, and they have now opened it to other schools in the area, including Ellenville, Highland, Kingston again, New Paltz, Onteora, Red Hook, Rhinebeck, Rondout, Saugerties, and Walk Hill. So I'll be attending that, and possibly Mrs. Dudley Lemick as well on Monday. It's a science lab initiative, and we're hearing that out of this comes some possibly robotics materials and makerspace funding from the Benjamin Center through Assemblyman Cahill. So I'll keep you posted on that when I get more information. And Sarah had the big one, the COVID thing. We've been working on that all week, and she's done an incredible job getting that all together. She did attend the Ulster County meeting with me, with Mark Ryder, and just trying to, it's always nice to have a couple sets of ears as you're going through that. They're speaking pretty quickly, and it's ever changing, and then you get the email, and then 5 minutes later you get something else that changes it. So, and Patrick was also part of that. So, a lot of work being done to make sure that we are up to date with the COVID protocols. We just got an email late this afternoon that the online dashboard will be back up and running through, and actually I don't know if it's Department of Health or State Ed, but that will be back up starting on the 13th, and we'll have to report our daily cases again. I don't know if you saw that email, it came when we were.
The last one I saw was that it was Ulster County Department of Health, but it could be, I know New York State has said they're going to have something, so that could be.
Yeah, it came from the governor's office, and it was
Yeah.
probably about 20 minutes before we met
Sure, it's those things.
for executive session. And I think that's all I had, because I spoke with most of the other things were more executive session type items.
Actually, I have a question.
Sure.
When do we have our new student rep?
Can you just talk a little louder, Tom, so that we
The
can
new
hear you?
student rep, that is something
New
that,
student rep for the board, when we install.
I wrote that down already, so I'll talk with Mr. Zimmer.
the high school will be working on that.
Yeah, I don't know that they've done any of their class elections or any of that kind of thing because of COVID last spring. So we'll definitely be able to update you. It could be that they'll be at the next meeting, I'm not sure. If not, then I'm sure by the first meeting in
Probably the
October.
first one.
Potentially, it could be the model we had last year, two.
I think we're going to push for one.
One,
Yeah.
great, good.
I think the whole reason for the two last year was the two cohorts.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
it was different students that were in at different times.
All right.
What about open house? How's that gonna be handled this year?
Open houses will be virtual. So the building principals are getting that information out to their parents as we speak. So I believe elementary school is
I don't remember the dates, but the way
early next week
Next
maybe?
week.
yeah, they're going to be, so normally at the elementary school, you have 2 grades coming in, so from whatever, 5:30 to 6, whatever, will be, for instance, kindergarten, and then from 6:30 to 7:20 will be 5th grade, so that you don't have to double up. And then the middle school and high school, just like you would normally do in person, you'll follow your child's schedule, but it will be Zoom meetings.
Kindergarten and 5th grade are on the 13th, 1st and 3rd grade are on the 14th, and 2nd and 4th grade are on the 20th.
And then,
And the middle school is on the 23rd.
and we just changed the high school this afternoon to the 29th, because it was going to be the 28th, which is our direct meeting, so we're not conflict with that, so 29th. But they're all sending information home.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, Board of Education, new business. Item 1, NISBA, Area 9 Director Election Ballot. The following school board members have been nominated by each 5-member school boards to be candidates for a 2-year term on the Board of Directors of the New York State School Boards Association, effective January 1st, 2022. Each member school board acting at a regular or special meeting is entitled to cast 1 vote for 1 candidate. So at this point in time, we have to narrow this list of 2 names down and to come up with a candidate who can.
No, I think, Tom, you should just, if you're doing a roll call, I think each member should vote yes or no for an individual. So if I'm supporting one individual, I'm going to say yes for Tom Miller.
Yeah, all right. If you want to do
They
it that
say
way.
the name,
Okay.
right?
It
So they
doesn't,
say the
it
name.
doesn't clearly delineate it
I don't
that
think
way,
we, I don't think we can eliminate a name
Okay.
unless we vote on it.
Right.
You can't eliminate a name.
Okay.
You put 2 names up there, we have
Yeah,
to
that was
vote
a
on it.
question.
That was,
Like,
we were going back and forth
Yeah.
on it, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, that's how it was kind of addressed to me by the attorney, having it set up like this, so,
Yeah, and then we just vote
Yeah.
whoever you want.
okay,
And
that's
whoever
fine.
garners the most votes is.
okay.
No,
If it's called, you'll either
That's
say
fine.
Brendan or Burns.
This is about as clear as mud, right? You know, so there's questions.
Well, we got legal
We
involved.
got it. We're good.
We haven't had to do this in quite some time, so
Yeah.
I will go ahead.
Tested.
So their both names are John, so maybe.
I know,
just-
I'm gonna go by the last name, and as the district clerk, I'm going to do the roll call, okay? So I'm going to ask each board member just to say, well, Redmond, for John Redmond, who's from Florida, New York. The other one will be John Burns, which is from Ellenville. So I'm just gonna go by the last name to distinguish them, and if you can just say, who your vote would be. So Camille, Redmond from Florida, Burns from Ellenville.
Burns?
Burns. Mike Bakaxias, Redmond from Florida, Burns from Ellenville.
Burns.
Okay. Alan Barone, Redmond or Burns?
Abstain.
Okay. Ed Mizell, Redmond or Burns?
Burns.
Okay. Heather Welch, Redmond or Burns?
Burns.
Sue Gilmore, Redmond or Burns?
Burns.
Tom Miller, Redmond or Burns?
Burns.
Okay, so that would make a vote of 6, 1 being abstained. All those in favor for John Burns from Ellenville? Say aye. Okay,
That works.
thank you.
Okay, next item, establishment of scholarship. Be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approves the establishment of the local memorial scholarship for the 2021-2022 school year as follows. This is going to be the Highland class of 1972 50th reunion scholarship. I have a motion.
Move it.
Al and Heather, any discussion on this? Other than thank you very much.
And this organization has a designated person, a designated contact who's gonna do this year in and year out?
Well,
I
if
think
you
it might
don't,
just be for this
if you don't
year.
mind, I'm gonna ask Miss Ingraham, who's in the audience, who's been, I'm sorry, who has been
Well,
the liaison between the
Mrs.
two.
Abraham.
This is a one-time scholarship. They're having a 50th class reunion.
I got you, okay.
Thank you.
The contact person is me.
Yes,
Hopefully,
thank you.
hopefully the class of 73 will step up next.
She's backing it. Thank you.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good. Old business, capital project update.
So at the last meeting, we heard very clearly that the board would like to have some discussion about what the board's ideas for upcoming capital improvement projects. So we felt that this would be a good time to brainstorm board members, what your ideas are. We'll bring them back to support services, and then support services could mesh those with what administration had presented, because our list was quite long, but I know that there was definitely some particular items that were mentioned, and so if we can, We can have the full discussion on each of the items as you want to bring them up, but more importantly, just we can get your ideas so that we make sure that this is not just driven by one, one set of folks. So really getting your perspectives. I know, Mr. Patsis, you had some strong thoughts on an item, so.
Yeah. I mean, I'm, again, elected by the community and
Yeah.
interact with many sports and in the community. For future consideration and or community school discussions, I'd like to consider extending the turf field. We have one now, we know it's highly sought after. Mr. Alfonso could probably tell us, everybody wants to be on that turf field, right?
Yep.
For a lot of reasons.
We've been rotating, but every day someone's there.
We continue to sink literally a lot of money into our athletic field. I'm not just gonna call it football. It's football, it's lacrosse, it's soccer, it's graduation, it's a lot of things. So we continue to put a lot of money into that field, trying to maintain it, drainage and all that. I think that at some point, we need to take a look at what other area schools are doing, and is that something we could replicate here? Again, and I'll state that anywhere, I feel very strongly, Ron Dowd Schools did a real comprehensive package. And I only really look at similar schools, so when similar schools in the area are pursuing this, I think it's time that we have a discussion about it with our community, and is it something to support? So that's turf. I think the other piece is that we really need to look at climate control. I'm not gonna say air conditioning, I'm not gonna say heat, it's just climate control, because we know that the learning environment is very challenged. And I'm not gonna ask you if you're a global warming person or not, we're not gonna get into that aspect. What we do know is we're dealing with fluctuations of temperatures as you move from September to October, and certainly anywhere from mid-March to on, and it really does affect, when we're building offices, air conditioning is automatic. And if we're doing that for employees to maximize the work environment, why aren't we extending that value to our classrooms with our children? So those are the two off the cuff.
Thank you.
While people are probably sharing their ideas, I'll probably come up with a few more.
Right, I think it's twofold right now. Number one, we're going through our building condition survey. Victoria, did we get any response back on that?
We don't have it back yet.
So that's being done by our current design team for our CS Arch. So we're gonna wait for that. This is based on the support service. And the other piece of it is, we've had some preliminary with Bernie Donegan, our bond counsel, to try to see what the maximum amount that we can put forward as a bond, and that's gonna be determined by our capital reserve, how much money we can take on that to offset the capital, probably make it, tax neutral. With that being said, Mike, an answer to your question, it was something that we had on our radar way back when, and our other projects never came to fruition. Depending on what our total bond would be, and Victoria, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a ratio that the state allows for, I'm gonna call it extracurricular, non-educational type activities. So turf field, a new press box has been on our radar also. Those things would have to be
In conjunction with building
with
improvement.
building improvements
Right.
in the ratio that they give us allocated money to be reimbursed through state aid.
Yep.
So, I think that's, one of the two items that are gonna be on our radar is the turf field and climate control. I know, Ed, you could speak for what your feelings are as far as the educational piece. I know you've mentioned that several
I'd like to, I'm not going to criticize, I think the turf field is something to explore, but I think I'd make great devil's advocate on that. given that, unless people is telling me otherwise, I think they finally achieved the balance in what they're doing out there.
Just a
Can you
little.
speak
Oh,
up?
yeah, I said, when we get to the point, when we have the discussion about the turf field, I'd like to go into depth on that and find out how our buildings and grounds people feel about it, maintaining. I know we had a rough start initially, but my understanding is it was under control. And it's not to put it off indefinitely, but I say this because I think there are many other things that we can invest in, including bringing our technology up, bringing our students to a level where Highland is, rather than playing catch-up, is leading the pack. And I don't think, here in the Northeast, I honestly don't think football scholarships are the way that our children are gonna be succeeding. I know there's a lot to be taught in team sports, and I think that there's a lot to be gained and benefit in terms of character and working as a community, but I do think we're in a technological age, and I think we should be looking at technological advancement for our students.
You don't need a capital project to advance technology, you could do that through the GF.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about building studios for the children to work in. You know, for the classroom studios, mobile, things that can integrate technology with the environment, technology throughout the buildings. I think, again, we're always playing catch up, and I feel like we're 10 years behind every time. Even the issue of robotics was brought to my attention. Apparently Pine Bush has a fantastic robotics program and a lot of equipment. I'd love to go and visit it and find out.
Well, that feeds into the discussion, because I think when we talk about high school, one of our limitations, we're at like 96% utilization. In other words, every room is being used every period. So what you're really talking about is, we probably need some additional space here at the high school. 3 or 4 classrooms, possibly to house some additional programs. I don't know.
Yeah.
I understand the concept of trying to be budget neutral.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get to any of these items probably with budget neutral, that's usually for smaller projects. These are ideas that the community, yes, we represent the community, but usually when you build up a capital project and a whole initiative, you wanna involve your community. These are just ideas that have come from the community that I'm sharing with folks. Eventually, they'll have to come, and if it's the night to talk about, whether it's turf or the robotics lab or whatever, if this is what it looks like, we know it's not gonna happen. You need community support for this. And beyond your parents, the community's got support, I understand. But I don't like, if you say this is gonna have to be bond neutral, then you're really taking the creativity out of that. Usually it's gonna go to the building conditions survey and stuff. But what we know is we're short on classrooms here to add any more programming. So I think adding some additional classrooms. I don't see the field as a football field, it's actually a classroom, because I think phys ed's out there on nice days using it. So that's used for a lot of different purposes, that field.
And honestly, that surface on that would make it more usable. Earlier.
We could bring
instead of
in
waiting for the
officials
green.
from Rondell schools and ask them how they like their new turf installation, and maybe they'll say, I think you should do it, and this is why we recommend, or, whatever.
How long have they had it?
There's plenty of time for all those conversations, 8 months.
I'm just curious, because there used to be data, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate, I fully support
Yes.
improvement.
No,
But there was higher rates of injury on turf fields, so there used to be data indicating significant higher rates. I'm just wondering if that translates
That's
to
all
the high
data.
school environment? That's what I'm
All
asking.
day.
things have changed since those
That's-
steps.
that's
But
asking about
at the
that.
same time, we have other sports, obviously, that we keep mentioning that play in that field. And we are starting to turn out some students that are getting college recognition and getting offers and getting scholarships.
Tom, I'm talking about
But
percentage.
I'm just saying, there is.
I'm not, and again, I'm not trying, I'm fully
Again,
in
I-
support of sports, I really am, but when we're talking about allocated monies to percentage of students impacted, I'd like to see, given that we have limited funds, I'd like to see the greater impact on the greater percentage of students, if we can. That's my only position.
My concern right now is, again, for the community and for the taxpayers. In the last 6 years, we did a $17.5 million project, we did an $8 million project. $25.5 million worth of work, at no impact to the taxpayers. We're looking right now, Victoria, I think currently, is it up to 12 million?
That's what we were looking at, I was just.
We're looking at a $12 million project currently without putting any more funds into our capital reserve, which can increase that to maybe 16, 18 million,
Well, that's-
with no impact to the taxpayer. That's gonna sell the project.
I had no idea that the number was so high. I had no idea.
I think
That's
I said
tremendous.
that two meetings ago when I was here.
12 million?
Currently it's 12 million, but that
Right,
could,
I think
that
it's
could
gonna go
increase
higher.
quite a bit with putting more of our capital reserve. Don't forget, our capital reserve expires in 3 years. I think at this point, 3 or 4 years. So at that point, we either have to renew the capital reserve or give the money back to the taxpayers, put back to the
At
county.
the same
I'd
time.
rather spend it and exhaust that and then think about reestablishing a capital reserve moving forward. But if we can offset that, make it a zero impact to the taxpayer and have an $18 million project, we're gonna get a lot done. And I agree with you, Mike, bring the community in to brainstorm, come up with some ideas where we can explore and move it forward.
Victoria, we're having, we have a significant amount of debt retiring also to help,
That already
So
happened.
the idea, we took out bonds to replace the vans that we
Yeah.
had. But what we're looking at is when the debt retires in a few years, replacing that with the next project.
And that's what we gotta be ready for.
yeah.
So the $12 million project was based on an assumption of having, I think, 900,000 in the capital reserve, which is what we had. We now have essentially 1.9. So I'll send
So we
those
could-
new
we're gonna
numbers,
increase that project tremendously.
I'll send those new numbers to Vernon Donovan's group and they can rerun their projections.
I think there was some ideas, and I'm just, please, anybody who's got more. Central office here takes up valuable real estate. We'll take care of that.
You can't-
They take up valuable real estate here in the high school. Is there a way, or is there space to address the other building on this campus? Put a second floor on it, do whatever you gotta do to address administrative needs. It's just this is a time to think outside the box, so I don't think I'm throwing anything crazy out
I
there.
think one other concern of the support service is trying to modernize our maintenance facility.
Yeah, I'd like to explore that, whether it's here or on that other campus. That's quite a bit of,
Yeah.
And then bus,
yes.
you talk about the busing area too, just.
I mean, so right now, we got a nice turf field and things have been improved, but you know what? You can't see it because it's wall-to-wall buses back there.
So the idea maybe if we can find another space for the maintenance facility, build a maintenance facility, and then convert the maintenance facility to an administrative facility.
And there was a standing question, which I don't think got answered, but I think we knew the answer, but the board itself did not get a response. What is the land we own behind the bus depot area?
58 acres.
Well, I know that, but I'll go for, what is that, and is that usable? I know up on top, there's a considerable amount of work, we're on a shale hill, so
Right.
that we know. But what about this immediately behind the bus depot? What land there can we recapture, if any?
The director of facilities we've had a discussion, I believe we're looking at a topo map and a survey, probably at our next meeting. There is an area directly behind the bus compound now that plateaus a little bit, so we might be able to use that for bus storage or a maintenance facility. And it
Whatever,
opens up, the lower end.
just loosens things up a little
Yeah.
bit. Moving the telephone pole that's right here in the parking lot. But
It's true.
it could be done. It's
It's not on our property though,
That's
it's on
Oh, it isn't?
it's on a sundial drive, whatever it's called.
But we can move it. Pricey, but they moved the one right out in front of Marlboro Middle School, that was quite a to-do. But they did
Accidentally,
it.
we can move it.
One dump truck can move it by accident.
They would fix it and put it right where
Right
it
back
is.
where
We
it
need
is.
it.
I think they've tried straightening it out a few times.
Anyway, things like that. Are there utility poles directly in front of our buildings that would be better served elsewhere?
So, moving forward, so the support service knows what direction, we had originally talked about possibly a May vote, but I don't know where the board stands right now as far as, moving in that direction. May of 2022, actual construction wouldn't probably take place until summer, spring of '23. We were looking that far out. That's something that we want the support service to kind of, start stepping up into a higher gear to move it forward, or we want to wait for the fall of
We've identified items, things that we're looking at, and we're waiting for the building surveys to be complete, that's gonna help. We know we have old surveys that were done, and old wish lists that were done, and items that consistently keep getting pushed to the bottom of the list, or, they lose out in the popularity, part of it.
Right.
The building condition survey is scheduled to be done by the end of this month, is what we were told at the last meeting.
That we have to look through quickly, and make some pretty quick decisions.
Is there a window of time to maximize the funding, when the funding falls off?
2 years from now,
It's
it's gotta be ready to
on
go.
the presentation that Bernie Dunn gave us, and I was trying to find it, we'll have to, we can
That
send
was
it.
really this fall they
Because-
wanted, as the initial.
That's what I
one
thought,
was
that's
this
why
fall.
it was such
There's
a
a-
quick turnaround time, right?
There's a whole
because of that.
timeline.
Yeah.
And so if we don't meet that point, then what happens?
Then we end up having,
The taxpayers feel like they've,
right,
There's that gap that's created.
Create some
So
volatility.
At some
Yes.
point, there should be a meeting before Thanksgiving that kind of talks about maybe some of the highlights of the building conditions or what support services says, look, we gotta address this, versus some of these other areas, and allow time for the community to
Is there,
voice in.
perhaps on the website, we could actually put in a discussion forum as well for people who can't physically be here, but could post, and of course,
Facility survey,
filtered so that anything that's inappropriate wasn't put there, but, I think, I really want the community to be active in what we choose and decide in a positive way, I want to, so, maybe we can make it accessible through the website and create a form, again, it would have to be filtered through, so anything inappropriate, if somebody's posting something that, doesn't belong there.
well, there's a couple different ways that could be done. Well, there's lots of ways, obviously, but, is it something, I know that there's a program out there where people can post their idea and then others essentially like that idea and it kind of raises it to the top, and then if someone posts things that people don't like and others ignore it, it kind of
Becomes a survey.
prioritizes as you go through. Or, would it be better to put up some things that are kind of our priorities of the board, and you kind of want to see where that priority is. So if we're talking about turf and climate control, whatever it might be, kind of what's your top choice of those things that we already know we're interested in, and then an opportunity for people to add others. There's different ways to do it,
That's
so.
I think there
Say
should be
measurement too.
three actually, the ones we absolutely need, that we see structurally and
Yeah.
facility, when we finish our survey, that should just be to inform. Then below that would be, as you say, the things that we're thinking about, and allow them to give feedback on that, and then an open space where if they have suggestions, they can put it. So I would basically put it in 3 tiers, I mean.
So
I think an open space is important, because I
Very
think
much so, yeah.
there will be things that maybe none of us are thinking about, that
Definitely.
somebody from the outside who's just a standard user of our space is thinking about that, maybe they don't say anything, so I
we
think
want to
it's-
hear all
The
voices.
best
And
ideas come
maybe a
from,
user of
yeah.
other spaces that has,
And they'll know
Right, or experience other places.
things
that-
the community may want and that we weren't aware of, or they're not even aware that they can ask for.
Yeah.
I'd love for us to become more, for the community to become more involved in the grounds too.
Yes.
Tom, I think we should probably, to jumpstart this, is possibly bring Bernie Donegan in, maybe at our next meeting, kind of see where we are, where that gap falls,
Where's that time frame?
and
We
the
need to
timeframe,
meet that.
and then what we can build around. I mean, it could be an $18 million project, but we should know that up front before we start exploring, how we want to address it to the community. At least they know, hey, we could build an $18 million project with no impact. Now come up with the ideas of what you want to try to see, that we have the additional money, that ratio between educational and non-educational, what we can spend. Tom, my take to you would be to try to get Murray Donegan in here through Victoria or
That's what we're
Joel
just
and-
discussing, try to get by the next meeting, as long as he's had a good, sufficient time to put that information together.
Well, it'll be a quick PowerPoint. I mean,
It should be,
It's
they already gave it to us, so
It's
they
already
really just have to
mostly
refresh
put
it.
together.
Right.
Yep.
It's always good to see Bernie.
Yeah, he's good. No, that's fine, we've already,
Are we gonna do tours, capacity with the tours in the building, just to kind of, so we're going through this, are you going in the building
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
what might pop out?
Victoria, what debt is being retired? Which one?
I have to go through the whole debt schedule and bring it to you,
Okay.
because there's a number of,
Right, there's quite a few.
there are a number of bonds out there,
Huh,
so.
okay. I didn't know we had that. I've got a question in regard to, the ARP and CRSSA spending plan. I just quickly added up what is, building, and non-educational. And it's like maybe about 1.3 million. Could we move some of that into the project, the capital project, and perhaps think of beefing up the reading teacher? Maybe at the elementary school or the middle school? I see we only have one position for the high school, but I think it would behoove us to maybe use this money for more reading specialists.
It's certainly something we can look at. The biggest, the biggest thing is always when you put people into a grant.
How do you sustain that
Right,
long term?
Right.
But still, it would help with the learning loss that we've suffered. And, perhaps it wouldn't be needed in 2 years, or perhaps there's a way we could keep that person with financial magic.
Well, right now we have like 8 people in there.
We have a
in there that
significant
we're
number of
thinking about
people.
trying to keep, so, we just have to keep those things in mind. But yes, and certainly, hopefully some of those support pieces would be temporary. It's to help us get over, what happened last year. And I am hesitant to use the term learning loss, because our students did learn last year.
Good for you. I
But,
like that.
they learned, they didn't learn maybe as much as they would have, but,
Neither did anyone else.
Exactly, so, but I, they did learn a lot of life lessons.
Money had the earmark for health and safety.
Some of it does have to be for
You
health and
couldn't get away
safety,
from that?
but, 1.3 million, probably
Yeah,
that's
can
more
you
than it
pull
needs
it
to be.
in?
That's what, about a quarter of the money,
Correct.
so.
The elementary school is having some very cost-effective software. Is there perhaps additional software we could fulfill the needs that Sue's looking at, that perhaps the people there could utilize it? And we'll look
Yeah, I
at
think there's lots of different
for that,
directions we can go, and certainly, we're looking at, right now, the math program that we're piloting at the middle school is all
I'll speak up.
virtual. So, we're investing in some of that. We're going to be looking at our math program at the elementary school as well, although I think that's in there.
Yep.
But yes, we could certainly look at supplemental programs as well as people for reading as well.
there's learning loss every year, no matter what you have.
That's just because we're getting older.
But
Tom.
no. Maybe personally speaking.
Well, I think,
You are.
I think the other thing that goes to the point that Mike made earlier about spacing, if we don't have rooms for some of these, additional people to work in, then it's like they're stumbling over top of one another. And
You heard
again,
Zimmer say, look, I'd love to add, where do I put it?
I'm all for giving more support, but at the,
It's gotta fit.
we're sort of
Yeah.
stretched. The elementary school is kind of stretched right now. There's not really anything else. There's no other space to go with, and I know the high school has the same.
As does the middle school. I mean, all
Yeah.
3 buildings are highly utilized.
But your point is well taken. I mean, any additional supports that we can get in here, even if they're short term.
Absolutely, that's where I'm more academically
Yep.
focused
No, we get it.
in student success. And it just the reports that Karen gave us, I would like to see us do better. And granted, there might be other schools that are just the same as us, but my focus is Highland.
Absolutely.
Can I just circle back around, Sue? You mentioned something about an idea of
If
maybe
you could
taking
speak up a little.
taking some of the federal money and putting it towards the capital work. So I think the reason that that's maybe not the best use of that money is that then that won't be aidable. You can't take money that's a grant and then get aid on top of it. They will not aid that.
And our aid percentage is pretty high.
2/3, 1/3.
So, yeah, so.
Well, I think what this Sue was saying is take it out of this grant,
Right,
not spend this money on those things.
right, that's what I'm saying,
And put it into the building project.
right.
Right, but that's not the best use of that money, because then we won't get any aid on it.
Why wouldn't this be aidable?
Because it's coming from the government, if it's not taxpayer dollars, they're not
But-
gonna
But
aid
if
it.
we take this out, just take it out,
And
then
spend
use that money-
for something else.
exactly.
Right, so
You're
use
talking about
that
reallocating
1.3
the
million
money to-
on reading teachers
Yes.
and, you know, whatever,
Yes, that's,
programs.
yes. And,
And put the building things that we put in there
which is
into the new
aidable.
building project.
Oh,
So not
Do we have
transfer
to
the money,
document that back to the?
Okay.
transferring just the
The
geography of the
Okay.
project.
all
It's
right.
gonna be
Well,
like
you would be
creative.
purchasing something
I
else
think I
within the
understand.
Yeah, I was thinking-
parameters.
If academically we saw the need, we could create a remediation program, just a temporary remediation
Yes,
program.
and there's a lot of
And
parts of
utilize
that
those funds
that
in
are
that
in there.
fashion.
Yeah.
So it would have a
Let's
beginning
do
date
that
and an
now
end
without
date.
our,
And
do that now.
I think,
That-
I
that's
know
my
what you're
idea.
saying,
Sure.
Sue, and I agree with you, but probably some of those things that you might pull out might not get done for 3 or 4 years from now. I mean, that grant money can activate those items within the next year or so. That's the only thing. I know some of that money is earmarked for health and safety, so I think we have to look at
And
how
I,
the government is going to look
It's
at.
just,
No, I know what you're saying, it's
yeah.
fencing around the elementary school on there, which is a big number.
Right.
Generating
That's
ideas, I
You
like it.
know, all the drinking
right,
fountains, a
and
big
yeah,
number.
let's borrow it and get the aid on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's, we don't need a fence at the elementary school
Huh.
now.
Have you
have you
seen it?
seen it?
Yeah, we
No,
do.
You
but
could
it-
lose,
but
you
it's-
could lose kids in a
Yeah.
ravine. It's
Around the
bad.
elementary
And
school.
sometimes I would also say, Sue, that, you know, the physical plant is an important boost to education because the way students feel when they're here,
Mhm.
you know, if they feel like it's a positive and welcoming place, they're going to be more likely to
Right.
feel like, you know, they should.
Yeah,
Do
but I
better. You
feel,
know,
I
that
feel that
part of
right
it?
now, I feel our buildings look awesome.
They
Oh,
do,
they do.
but there's still more, and
Yeah.
you might want to just drive by the elementary school, that's,
It-
it's
that
not
was
our,
just-
it's not our high
yeah,
point.
yeah.
Usually they're the areas that we don't see from the
Yeah.
road per se.
Yeah.
But
But
Sue,
if
you
you
bring a
follow
very
that fence
important
line, it
point
gets a
that we
little
need to
grisly.
keep
I-
on.
Yeah,
I-
it's just, I'd rather see us get the aid on it, you know, and just,
Do we know, and we don't have to right now, you can just say, I don't know, but we know that there's several building projects within our school district. Adding bodies, adding capacity. Do we know if we've had what's our lost gain from this year to last with the student body? Enrollment.
It's fluctuating by the day.
Some of the new apartments coming in.
it was about
But-
1570.
It's not going
I'd
up.
say the decline's been about 250 students over the
Yeah.
last 7 or 8 years, so we
Yeah,
have that
Lately,
capacity
the
to
area
fill those.
of real estate's back on the rise.
In the last couple of weeks, and this is before, it was about a week ago when we had a whole bunch of more coming and going, but I know we had, I think, 50 in and 11 out. And that was
Yeah.
over probably a 3 to 4 week span
That's
in
what I'm
August, in the
talking
beginning of
about.
August. And over the last week, honestly, this week is one of the busiest because people come show up at the school this week, like, oh, hey, I'm ready, my kid's ready, and they didn't call us over the summer. And they moved, or they're moving at this time of the year, so.
Or there's closings happening.
But we're,
Some
but
of those.
we're at a major loss over when I first took over the elementary school. We're only in like the high 670s right now, and when
We
I
were
first
over
started there,
800.
we were close to 870.
Right.
So in the last 17 years, we've lost.
Right, and I think
Quite a
that the
few.
stats were, we were closer to, 2,000,
Yeah.
and now we're around 17, so there's been a three.
Right,
Yeah,
we can expect these things move in waves. and
absolutely.
I think when, I remember back in the seventies, not that I remember the seventies, but I've heard of, that I think when the flu had come through, there was quite a boost in population,
Right.
as there often is when there's a situation that puts people in homes, we tend to see socially that tends to be an uptick in population.
Usually when you engage in capital project discussions, there is some level of enrollment study. I mean, we might say that, but yet we're all also, I'm hearing school personnel say, the room utilization is very high. So if we were gonna add it, so while that's true, there has been addition of programs, there has been addition of staff. Why? Well, the requirements from the state keep going up.
Sure.
So even if you're serving less students, programmatically, there's more needs.
Right.
But right now, hygienic space is a huge impact.
Right, even with less
Yeah.
students over the term. Why? Because programs change, mandates keep coming down the pike. So, if there's a way to get an enrollment study,
You mean a projection?
Do that
or-
every year?
Usually
yeah,
there's.
sometimes that's part of building condition survey or.
It's been done.
Yeah, a few
We
years
did
ago.
one about 10 years ago. The projection was for our enrollment.
That we were gonna
We
skyrocket.
were gonna skyrocket.
And it did just the
Oh, you're
opposite.
kidding.
We
Oh, I
had the
didn't-
support service
I
talked
didn't-
about adding an addition back here for 7th and 8th grade,
Huh.
moving 5th and 6th up to the middle school, and making the elementary school K to 4.
Right.
That just turned, we spent, I don't know what it was, $25,000-$30,000 for this
We
survey.
also had a funding crisis around that
And
time.
this was after 2007-8.
Yeah.
This was in the early
I don't
12,
remember that.
13, yes.
Yeah.
They projected, I think I still have a copy, they projected our enrollment to
Huh.
skyrocket.
I don't remember that.
Anyway,
So,
What's our, what was our kindergarten enrollment, do you know?
I think we're at 126 right
Okay.
now.
Around that.
So that is, that's
It's a
a
more
huge-
normal number
That's a
than what we've
that's
seen.
normal.
let's see what.
Yeah.
So it might be interesting to just take, even the data that we could pull,
Yeah.
we're smart people, we see trends.
Can I shift topics just briefly? I had some people asking me about the busing situation. I know the busing is new and we're trying to get under regular routines, and I will speak up, sorry.
It's okay. If I turn my head,
No,
I
sorry,
hear that.
I keep forgetting this. I tend to speak low to begin with. The busing, there are some parents who have been waiting to hear, I guess some of the children are coming back an hour after they're supposed to. There's been some significant delays, and I don't think they're concerned so much about the delays, but they want to be contacted rather than having to wait at the foot of a driveway. But,
Maybe a
for an hour.
message to go out that says
Yeah.
bus.
Yeah, so,
expect
I mean,
buses
I
to be
understand there
later.
are hiccups and we have to make accommodations. My understanding for one route was that there's so many children on the bus because it also takes children to karate and it takes them that they're making 2 loops to refill the bus.
Yeah.
But, so when the children are getting home an hour later than expected and the parents aren't notified, I have some concerns about that, so.
no, we can discuss that with Kathy tomorrow.
Any other capital project updates, just sort of coming back to any other ideas?
So the building condition survey will be done
We're told by the end of the month.
end of the month, okay.
But one of the things that the building condition survey needs is a series of questions answered by our director of O&M, and he has not received those yet. So,
Thank you.
I think what Mike mentioned about the enrollment study, we're talking about, I think some of it needs to be done. We're talking about trying to increase spaces. Is it truly a need, or maybe how we utilize, I love what Ed said about the technology, but, we need more staffing to operate those spaces too, which needs more space. So I just think we're gonna have these conversations that we hopefully see. There's rushing construction happening. I know in my neighborhood, there's a whole bunch of houses being built. Will that bring in younger children to our district? To be determined, but just thinking about long-term proper use of that space. So I hope we can try to get something like that, done, some data. Yeah, and there's one other,
That's the school study council,
Yeah.
exterior recreation.
yes, I forgot about the point, one other point I mentioned, I'll come back to it. I'll write it down next time.
The
Well,
school
even if you
study
think
council
about it-
does that?
Mid-Hudson School Study Council.
Camille, if you think about it even after, just shoot us an email so that we can get it on the notes.
Playgrounds for middle school. That's my idea.
Are we done discussing capital project? Any other questions? Ideas? No?
Oh, just going back to capital project updates, current project, I'd just like to propose that we have the contractor that's doing the canopy to be informed to stop work for the time being until it gets resolved through either our director of facilities or the design team. Let's proceed.
I believe they stopped the work today for a meeting tomorrow.
As long as they have that, the authority coming from the board, that we want that stopped until they resolve it. And it's in the best interest of the district.
And we'll make sure that you get an update tomorrow at the conclusion of that meeting.
I remember the point I was trying to get at, the architects, they have the ability to go into a building and look at the capacity, show whether we're, at capacity, under capacity, over capacity, so I think maybe, too, we're talking about these projects and we can have, I'm not sure what stage they could do that,
It's a building utilization
but the architect
survey.
could put a number based on their enrollment and they look at projections, like, in my own experience, I've seen that, it's been very helpful. Have
Yeah.
some metrics to that.
Yeah, maybe he could make recommendations in better use of our space. Yeah.
Well, I think there would also be value in looking at the spaces we have and updating them to a 20% change as well.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
definitely, just looking at our library here at the high school, that's a reimagining of that space, and it's going to bring big change to the building, and I think, we can look at doing that on a classroom level as well.
Good?
Yeah, thank you.
Miscellaneous, is there any correspondence we've received that includes
You got a letter?
I think there are two listed in there.
Yeah, there's one about the masking requirements, but that was a few weeks ago, which Ms. Dudley Lemick has already updated you on. And the other was from a community member that you did respond back to.
I did, yeah.
Yes,
I did
thank you.
respond.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
That's,
yeah.
okay, Okay.
That took place.
are we going to be copied on that, or?
I can forward it to you.
Oh, I'll do it right now, yeah. Or if you want.
I want to make a public comment in, I appreciated her letter. I felt it was very well thought out. It was a lot of emotion there, and I sincerely appreciate that she reached out.
And that, the letter was a result of, just not being able to, she was in attendance at a meeting and just couldn't voice that opinion, publicly, her feelings publicly, so she put it in a letter. That letter was, I think everybody got that letter. All right. I apologize for not including the whole board in the CC on that. It was 4 or 5 individuals that were on it, that I wanted to get that message out right away to that person. So, Lisa, you're forwarding it to everybody. Okay, thank you.
And just on that too, the direct, so we're talking about adding to the committee, I just think that would be a good individual to see their
We'll
interest
just
in
make sure they
applying.
get it.
An invite.
Okay. Ulster BOCES presentation, obviously that's gonna happen
October
October
26th.
26th, so.
If that works out for everybody,
Just a notice.
yes.
Okay.
That's
Okay,
the normal meeting, right? No.
Yeah.
26th is the next one?
No.
That is a good point.
I thought it was
The
third
27th.
Tuesday.
It's not. It's the fourth Tuesday of the month.
Right.
I don't remember seeing
No.
this on the
Yeah, it is the
agenda the
12th
other day.
and
Are these new additions?
12th and 26th.
12th and 26th?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how we switched to the second week.
Well, I'll explain.
All right.
It was just some conflicts when Carly and Tom Bon Jovi and myself, we met months ago when we had to work out the schedule. There was a conflict for October 5th, and that's why we moved it to the 12th. So, and to keep the 2 months there. But, you know, if you want to change something around, please let me know.
Star pilot, June 2021 data and summer academy.
So I sent this out late last week. Sue, I apologize, we couldn't get it to you earlier in that week, but you had requested that data. So we met with Karen and asked her to give us a summary of the data. That's what we sent out to you. We asked her to try to make it in a one-page document so that it would be something that you could see from one point to the other. And maybe we missed the mark on leaving some information off. That was not intentional. It was so that it would be all on one side. The biggest point that came from the STAR data were those focus skills that were on the, well, you might not have been on your reverse side. It was on our reverse side of that page so that that information went to the teachers. The other thing is that the teachers all have individual accounts with their students' names attached to them, so they can drill down the data on individual students. That would have been hundreds of sheets of paper to give you
No,
the individual. So
No.
we did it more as a percentage.
There's no,
So
right.
then you had asked for some follow-up, so Sarah was working with Karen yesterday and today in amongst trying to get the COVID stuff to you. So we'll have
that
some
by Friday.
other information for you by Friday,
okay.
all right?
Yep, it's just the format that she presented last spring, that was really good because you could see the growth or the decline from one period to another, and I would really like to see that continue. It's,
Well, I think you'll see it in a better way when we're, like, the STAR was the pilot, so now we have a baseline, and so you'll be able to see that information on a regular basis. I mean, I think, did you
That's-
send those dates?
I did.
So
I think I
we'll have-
responded to the whole board so that you'll, the first meeting, well, I'm not gonna say it right now because I don't have it, but, well, you know.
You did send it though.
Yeah.
The
both those dates will
the
definitely
difficult thing with that one sheet that we sent you was that last benchmark. As we told you, those benchmarks are sort of encapsulating particular topics. So it's not necessarily a growth that you can see from the STAR to those benchmarks. Those were,
They're summative. So
Summative.
they're looking at particular units, whereas the STAR is looking more skills-based and they're
And
kind of
longitudinal.
comparing it, right, from time to time. And which is one of the reasons that we're now moving to just doing the STAR next year.
this year.
This year, yeah, right, now.
Yeah.
In fact, they should begin taking them next
So
year.
your internal benchmark system has been abandoned,
Yes, it really
discontinued.
It became
For that purpose, yes.
It became
But some
very
teachers are,
cumbersome.
they are using some of the things that were created.
Teachers do all kinds of assessment all the
Right.
time, but systemically, we've abandoned the internal benchmark.
Yes.
Yes, it just really didn't give us the information, the kind of information that we wanted to use.
So that was about a 3-year effort that didn't hit the mark,
It didn't,
and
and now
That's
we're
been
switching to STAR. And it does seem, you know, we haven't had state assessments in couple of years now, but what I'm seeing on the STAR results is similar to state assessments that we've received in the past. So I feel like the STAR is probably giving us a better representation so that if we do take state assessments in the spring, I think we'll have a better idea of how students are going to do on those going in. So.
And the nice part about the STAR is it disaggregates the data for you, and you can get an individual, like, student by student target list to get the teachers, give that information to them in real time. Whereas those benchmarks, yes, they were summative, they had to be all manually done. manually graded, and then disaggregated to give reports back to teachers. It was a
What time?
time-consuming thing that did not produce
And not
to
immediate.
the level that we would have wanted.
What, I know what Sue's interested in, and systemically, what data are you using that drives these decisions when you talk about curriculum? When you talk about moving part of the student population, a grade level, whoever's having problems with that skill, what data drives the instructional decision making?
Well, this data is gonna help, because a lot of that other data was teacher-created, internally from teacher to teacher, and it didn't always match.
Right.
So this is going to give a level playing field, and it's going to, I hate to say tell the truth, but it's going to expose where the weaknesses are and show where those strengths are, so that maybe instead of always focusing on a particular skill because you think that's the one that needs the focus, let's focus on the things that get pulled out of that data in real time, in a faster way, and we meet the kids where they need to be. Now, we've done some, we've disaggregated data for years, but again, it's a labor-intensive thing that doesn't always, it doesn't always get you where you need to be, you know?
So hindsight's 2020. What was the benefit of trying to do our internal versus looking at this initially? Is it a funding thing? Is it
It was
thought we had
trying to move away from like state.
We didn't have
Trying to
enough,
move away
we
from
had
state
too many
and be
people
more
opting out of the
holistic.
state, so we were trying to.
Ultimately,
Well, yeah,
it's
but
the
we
state
tried
assessment
doing-
you're weighing against, so
Correct.
you gotta include it.
Right, but we tried doing our own assessment versus going for STAR, right?
So there's a couple of things that played into that, I think. So when I started in this position 7, 8 years ago, whenever it was right when Common Core was starting. There was such a huge pushback against Common Core, and the STAR and the NWSDA assessments were very closely tied to those.
Got into that.
So there was a very
Makes sense.
negative
Connotation.
bias,
yes, yeah,
whatever,
okay.
within the teaching
Makes sense.
environment. On top of that, there certainly has been value in the benchmark assessments in teacher collaboration and looking at those and really looking at questions and thinking about how, how to
Pedagogical
assess.
discussions, right? It
Yes,
fu-
like,
fuels
there's been definite
good
value
discussion.
in that part of it. But it just, the feedback really didn't come quick enough to be able to respond kind of in the moment. And it was, STAR hires a whole bunch of people that know how to do assessment, right? And they can scaffold it and they can follow a skill. And the way STAR works is, if a student struggles on 2 questions in a row, they'll actually drop the level of the question. And the student, if it answers it quickly, it goes back up. It's adaptive is what it's
So
called.
the frustration
So-
level doesn't
right, so the
influence the
student-
testing.
And that was what would happen sometimes on the benchmark, is if the student was really far behind, they'd try doing the first 2, and if they couldn't do those questions, they'd cry, they'd give up, lots of different things, so we just weren't really getting good, is that fail-proof, the STAR? Of course not. Are there some students who are just gonna rush through it? Of course not, but we can look at it, and that's where all that other data is interesting. We can look at how long they took on the assessment. If they rush through it in 5 minutes, we know we're not really getting a true picture of what the student may or may not know, or, what other things might be indicated in them rushing through it that quickly. If they're doing really well, but they take the full, however long 30 minutes that it takes, what does that say about that student too? So, there's a lot of data that we can get from the STAR. Certainly, we're still going to continue to do not only our big summative type assessments, but of course the daily, the daily, in and out and quick kind of assessment as well.
That's teachers, but managerially speaking, I think what Sue's getting at is there's value in data. But if we don't, if you're looking at last year's data now, it's no good.
I think that's what she
Class is
said.
already set, the composition of the way the classes are, right, that's all done. So it's gotta come sooner to management to guide those decisions. Teachers are always talking about students, student performance, and making adjustments in their classrooms all the time, every day. But managerially speaking, when you're cited by the state for a certain item, or how does management use data to help guide those discussions so you do hit the mark.
And that's why we're going to doing the STAR 3 times a year, so that we can look at that and have those conversations with the teachers, again, in real time, on an individual basis, as well as looking at more longitudinal, 6th to 7th to 8th grade, or kindergarten to 5th grade, whatever it might be. That's the information we'll use as administrators, in addition to, other factors as well. We are doing this with both math and reading across the board. And certainly in reading at the younger levels, we still are doing dibbles and some of those things as well.
So the STAR will include K through 8, math and English, and
Yeah.
we can be assured that we will get these reports timely.
Yes, on the dates that I gave to you, possibly
Yes.
sooner, depending.
Yep,
Part of it was
I'll
just there are
print that
some
out.
months where we only have one meeting, so being able to get it all,
The
yeah.
kindergarten is a combined thing,
Yes, I saw that,
Yeah.
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that won't be
Yeah.
parsed out because
Right,
it's
right.
more of a
Yeah.
combination.
And we are looking at using STAR at the high school level as well, possibly just starting with 9th grade this year, just to do some diagnostic kind of work
Yeah,
with
that
it.
would also be nice to get some reports with the high school performance
Yeah,
as well.
and that, the high school environment is a little bit different,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Or maybe
kind of figuring out
passing,
how to,
failing, yeah.
and just, everyone's leveled so much more in math by the time you get to high school, and so.
Well, one of the reasons why we did this in June was so that there was a comfortability going into this year. So students have been through, if you've been here, you've been through it once.
At the
So
elementary level.
there was definitely a learning curve on how to sit for this type of assessment. So that's why we use the term pilot with that, because we don't wanna put too much emphasis, especially at the lower levels, because they've never had that kind of environment that they were using. But we feel that over, now that they've had it once, they'll do it again now, they'll do it again in, so many months,
Tell you, none of this stuff is going away, I'll tell you, because even like higher ed, they could look, we're not gonna look at the SAT, we're not gonna look at the ACT. But I sat through several orientations as my son's looking for college. And even though they might say, well, we don't look at the ACT, when admissions talked about what we look at, grade is right there.
Yep.
Types of classes are right there, because they're primary, and they stated, all the institutions stated it, because success in academics is the primary focus of higher ed, and then the other things. That's schooling, no matter what age.
correct.
So this is here to stay, the regents here to stay, assessment here to stay, not going anywhere, even though they might knock off an ACT or ACT. Their primary admissions looks at, not only, but certainly looks at the types of grades you got, the types of courses you took, and what that looks like over your 4-year high school. Not going away.
Yep.
It's how we.
The summer academy, staffing wise, how many staff for elementary and how many staff for the middle school, especially given that middle school is only 10 people? I'm just curious about the staffing as well as what was done structurally during those programs. I know in the past we've had presentations about the summer program, but just curious, what happened during that time frame and that's supposed to staff.
And I'll support busing for those programs to increase access into the future.
I believe we offered busing this summer,
Right?
and we did the year before, yes.
It's just so surprising, so,
Well, I
If I
do
were
think
a
that
parent,
this year,
One of the things that we learned a lot this year with the summer program, and we heard it over and over again, whether it be administrators making the calls, teachers, Karen made a lot of calls, parents were like, this is my first opportunity that I get to go somewhere with my kid. So a lot of them would not commit, and so you have to honor that, like, they've been
You
cooped
can't
up.
force them, it's
Yeah, you
voluntary.
can't force it.
It's just,
But,
it's, you're inviting them for a reason that the children need.
Additional
That
time.
ex-
It's one of the
yeah.
only time, it's,
Yeah,
especially with those early learners,
exactly.
how do you grab additional time?
Yes, the
Summer's-
early learners,
So maybe
yes.
that's something going into this summer,
Yes.
hopefully it's not as challenging, right?
I
We're
think
learning
it
to
was-
live with COVID.
I think it was
living
what
with
we were
COVID.
coming off of this year,
I
because
think-
we've had better participation in previous years, I think.
And we've never done middle school before too, so I do think that there's not even a kind of tradition of it at the middle school, so I do think that.
But even outside of that, I know that as a family, it's harder and harder to get time to spend together as a family.
Yes, it
Where
is.
somebody's not, where everybody's not working, or somebody doesn't have a different commitment. So I know that the summertime has remained that kind of a sacred space.
But
And
this is just so valuable.
I understand, but families are also valuable, Sue, and if they're not, a child's not gonna listen to a parent that's never there, you know, and
We could beat the drum, not everybody's gonna march.
Yep.
We'll continue beating that drum.
It's just.
no, I think we should encourage it, but I think we also have to respect families that wanna look out for their family, I think that's very important as well.
Yeah, right, just thinking about this, and how long was the program?
It was only 2 weeks.
2 weeks. And then just going back to the staff, how many staff for each?
I don't have it with me.
It was
I'll have
quite a
to.
few, if I recall correctly. I remember being really impressed.
And I know at the elementary school, the way that we've set it up now, the last several years that we've done it, is it's kind of a team approach. So, one pair of teachers will do the ELA K through 5. One group of teachers will do the math, so the students actually move from classroom to classroom, instead of them being in one space for, 4 hours at a
Sedentary for
time.
that time.
Yeah, and then they've done it, I know this year they did it, it was an Olympics theme the whole week, and so their activities were centered around that. Truthfully, I don't know as much right off the top of my head about the middle school program. And part of it too is there was competition sort of from the BOCES program, which was credit recovery. That was all virtual. So we did have quite a few students that participated on that because they could get course credit for it.
Middle school?
There was a BOCES middle school program that you could do course recovery. Again, all virtual. So we did have quite a few students who had failed courses who took that and were able to regain credit. So our middle school program was enrichment / trying to, I don't want
Can't do, it's hard to do enrichment and remediation,
to.
Sarah.
Right, so,
The two don't mix, so that's why we're
Yeah.
talking about targeted.
yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Do you know how many students in middle school did the course recovery?
I do, I don't have it with me, but yes, I have a chart that we got, every student in every grade. I'd say there was probably 20.
Good.
As Mike says, keep beating the drum.
Moving on, we already did talk about the student convention.
Yep.
Yep.
Again, if anyone's interested, just please shoot me an email.
Okay. Public comments.
Is there another, do we have another? I'm sorry.
Oh, the NISDA convention.
That's just- yeah.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
Oh, it's this thing,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Before we get to public comment, and this is only gonna take 30 seconds. I think at the last meeting I asked about the website for the racial equity, but I see it's not updated.
Yeah, so we have actually a high school teacher who is Judy, is specific to our direct committee this year, and so one of her charges is going to be to update that and keep it going, and so that every meeting, we're posting our minutes and doing all of that. So we'll be going with that immediately.
Okay. 'Cause 2 weeks from now, I'm gonna look, and I'm expecting to see some kind of update, 'cause it stops it.
Particular to the equity committee that we were talking about, or?
It's on our website, you can review it, we talked about it the last time, it hasn't been touched, but whoever you assign it to, let's see some movement on that.
Yep.
Do they only have that one assignment, or is it overall the whole website?
It is not the whole website.
Because we've all noticed over time, things have been lacking within the website in general, like way out of, schedule and past, so.
Just general content upgrade
Right.
across the building.
Somebody has to have that assignment, if not, somebody needs to have that assignment. Okay. Again, public comment.
Mary
Mr.
Ann?
Owen waiting? Are you waiting to say something?
No?
Oh, okay. I guess it's me then. I'm Neil Richter, lived here since 1977. I was here last month, as you know. And I want to apologize, first of all, I took my insulin, I'm diabetic, half hour before I came that night. And I took too much, my blood sugar was down to 60, so that's why I was as wild as I was, so I apologize for that. Second thing I want to say is I respect each and every one of you, what you do, it's enlightening sitting here. You volunteer your time to do this, and you do a great job. I think Highland's got a great school system. My son went here, my grandkids go here. So that's the second thing I want to say. The third thing I'd like to say is, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Freer. And I'm doing that on a personal note because he was so kind to my wife through all of my son's illness and my son passed. And you couldn't have been better and I'm so proud that you got this job. I really am. The reason I'm here tonight, Pastor and I talked, as you know, and I don't take back anything I said that night, by the way. I did watch it, and I know I was over the top, but I don't take back anything I said. I don't think anything that I said was out of line, and certainly I don't think the pastor was out of line. And I'm just wondering if anything that we said to you that night, did anybody look into critical race theory as we asked? Did anybody look to see what you're doing here? And this Dr. LeBlanc, I've read a lot about him. I read Mr. Bon Jovi wrote a big note about him, what he's doing. I'd be very interested. I'd love to talk to the man and sit down and talk to him if I could, just on a one-to-one basis if he'd do it. Because again, I hope you understand, and Pastor Juan, we met the next day, all the people that were here that night, we had a roundtable discussion about, did we give you the wrong impression? Did we give you the impression that we're not for equality? Because that is absolutely not why we were here, why I'm here. We want everybody to be equal. But what we've seen is our research has done, if you study critical race theory, in fact, I'd like to ask you all, I wrote a 3-page letter the next day, and I addressed it to the district clerk. She told me she never saw it. Did anybody here see my letter? And I asked every one of you to read it. I don't know how that could be. I put it in the post office myself.
Yeah. She
said she saw it,
I saw a copy of it.
but nobody else saw it. And what it was, I expanded on what I had said the night before, in a much calmer fashion, of course. And I cited.
You weren't that over the top, just to let you know. I
Okay.
think you were,
Well,
just
I
because
was.
Cheryl yelled
No,
at you.
I was.
You weren't that over the top. I'm gonna tell you right now.
Cheryl just
You
shook
were
her
all
head
right.
when she watched it.
You're all right.
Well, again, I apologize if I was, but anyway. But that bothers me, the fact that I sat down, wrote a 3-page letter, asked every one of you to read it so that I could come here again and see your thoughts on that. And I'm finding out nobody read it. I don't understand it. That bothers me.
So whoever got it, give it to.
I did not get it. I did not
I
get it.
addressed it to her, sent
Somebody
it
got
right
it.
here.
Victoria
mailed
did.
it.
I asked him to please check your computer, and I gave him my email
I'll see, I
address.
typed it on my
and
computer, I
to
don't know if I
retry
saved
it.
it, if I did. But basically, I expanded on what we were talking about that night, and I, offered a lot more in the research that I've done to point out what is wrong with this critical race theory that's spreading like wildfire. And I don't know if you noticed, any of you know, 2 days ago, 9 politicians in this state suggested that we put a ban on critical race theory in this state. Did you see that? Any of you? You saw it?
Yeah.
Very good. And it's a very, very I take it so seriously, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, because go ahead, I'm sorry.
Did you hear that critical race theory was being taught in the schools? Like, I understand you're passionate about it, but what's the nexus with Highland Public Schools?
Well, what I'm saying is, I believe that critical race theory has filtered into this school system. And I believe it based on things that I've talked to my own grandkids, things that I've talked to other people, what I'm hearing. I was a school bus driver here for a year, and what I'm concerned about is, like this Dr. LeBlanc, for example. He talked to everybody. I didn't even ask my wife. She was at the meetings, obviously. I didn't ask her one word about what the man said. But why isn't this being put out to the community, what he's saying, what he's directing? Apparently he's directing, and this equality committee, that's the first I've heard of it. May I ask what that is?
Sure, that's a committee that we started last school year, the
Yeah.
beginning of the school year, and we put it out through social media. We
Yeah.
talked about, and actually we talked about pretty much every meeting, every board meeting, we reported on the work that we did.
Mm-hmm.
This is a committee to talk about, and inclusivity in our district. So making sure that all of our students feel represented and feel
Okay.
that they
And
have.
on the surface, I applaud
But
you.
that was also in direct response to a group of over 70 students coming to us with testimonials. about
That's one to watch
incidents.
online.
About
Excuse me,
incidents.
let me listen to what he said.
No, but that's
please.
what Mike is saying. So these were students who came to us with testimonials about instances of racism, of bias, of
Racism by who?
against them by other students.
By
And
other
the building-
students,
And
okay.
other, and
Or
people, adults, staff members. It's on the files if you want to watch it. It was a very powerful meeting, and the fact that the students came of their own volition, nobody put them up to it. They came and asked us to change the environment. So this isn't, I think we tried to express that night, that this wasn't a choice of curriculum.
Yeah, but
This is a choice.
here's
of
what
trying
I'm
to-
worried about. Here's what I'm worried about. And again, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm not saying I'm not saying, for example, that there's no racism in this country. There is. But I will say this, racism goes in all directions. I was a school bus driver right here.
This isn't the point in one direction or another. And Dr.
But it
LaFont's-
is. Critical
No,
race
Dr.
theory does.
Dr.
Critical race
LaFont's-
theory,
Can't,
if I could.
No, we shouldn't be.
Okay, I'm sorry.
discussing.
But critical race theory, if you go and look at critical race theory, and then they've changed it, as Pastor Joe explained to you, it's now being called different things because everybody reacted to it. But what it says is, there are two types of people in this country, oppressed and oppressors. So I'll leave it to you all to, who do you think the oppressors are? And this is what I'm worried about, and this is what we were worried about. And it's something that's all across this nation. The thing I wrote in my letter, which was brilliant, I thought was a very literate woman that wrote, when Thurgood Marshall, Supreme Court Justice, black Supreme Court Justice, one of the things he did before he was Supreme Court Justice, he gave dolls to children, one black and one white. And he asked children, young children, to tell about these dolls, and everything about the black dolls they were saying was bad. And that was horrible. And that's one of the things that got Thurgood Marshall to change the way things were, and he eventually, great man, got on the Supreme Court. But this lady that wrote about that also then wrote about critical race theory. What it's doing, it's now reverse racism, because it's making people, children, this is what I'm worried about, it's being taught from 3rd grade to 12th grade. What's that?
2 more minutes. Couple minutes, come on now, please.
Well, what I want to know is, Mike, excuse me, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you a question, but
Go ahead, I can answer.
when I was here last month, you were saying, I didn't know anything about this. Did you do any research, or has anybody looked into this? Or did we just waste our time, Pastor and I?
You didn't waste your time.
Okay,
You voiced a concern you had,
Yeah.
a community value,
yeah,
which I believe that same night we said, many of us share that same value. Critical race theory is not being taught in our schools. If you heard something or something concerned you about your grandchild's education, the first contact for the parent is the teacher. Talk about it. If you don't like it, then you talk to the
no, I
principal.
wasn't referring to that at all.
Okay.
My grandson was the one the pastor mentioned that night, that came home and said to me, I'm embarrassed to be white, I'm ashamed to be white. And I looked at him and I said, what? And he said, no, I am. He said, he's telling me that, because all they're getting thrown at is white people are oppressors, white people are this, white people are that.
It
And
doesn't matter if it's that or a man. Who spoke to the teacher? Did someone call the teacher?
it wasn't a teacher.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't a teacher.
Oh.
But what I'm saying is that, and to answer your question a little bit further, is that what I want to know is, what is it that the teachers are being told that they have the kids to read, or this is what I'm nervous about, I'm upset about, is I don't want to see this thing. I'm all for equity, but I don't want to see this thing where we're teaching 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, right up to 12th grade, that you are bad because you're white.
And do you have an example of that?
Critical race theory.
No.
Well, that's-
We can't get into this
So,
debate.
Mr. Richter, one suggestion that I would make is, if you have the time, go back and watch the July 1st.
I will do that, I will do
Let me
that.
finish. Go back and watch the July 1st.
Yeah.
But
let me tell you this, if I may.
July 1st board meeting.
Yeah.
All of the committees presented on the work that was done all year, and
Okay.
Dr. LeBlanc was at that meeting as
All
well.
right, I will do that, I
So-
promise.
Yeah.
But I will say this, I drove school bus 4 years at Valley Central, much bigger school system than this. I drove school bus here for 1 year till I had a brain tumor, couldn't drive anymore. I'm gonna tell you right now, if I said it once, I said it 50 to 100 times. The N-word was used by blacks against other blacks all the time on my bus. I was always scolding them, calling each other that, and it was astonishing to me. I was like, what are you crank? What are you doing, you know?
Yeah, but
And,
you don't say that every black kid is doing that.
I'm not saying every black kid, but I'm saying, what I'm saying is that word was used by them, you know what I'm saying? And I was astonished by that.
We're gonna have to stop.
Sarah,
at
do you
this
have,
point.
what was the date that the students presented to the board?
I think
I think it was July.
May.
I was thinking the
It was
same.
the
It
July
was a reorg meeting.
2018, I think,
Oh,
because
Is
I
that still
wasn't
available
there.
online?
I'm sorry,
Is that available online still?
No.
Or is it-
They are, all the meetings are live streamed, is that what you're referring to,
So
the
I
board
was just wondering-
meetings?
I don't know how far back they go though.
So they, just,
I lose track of
They
you.
go back
I think
pretty
it was
far.
July of
It was
2020.
July
Mr.
20.
Ardern, you have my number here at the
Yes.
school, if you have any questions trying to find it,
Yes.
okay, you can contact
Okay.
and the
me.
only reason I bring this up, and this will be my final point on this.
Yeah.
Because I understand from your point of view, you think that there's something surreptitious going on. Why is Dr. LeBlanc here? What is the motivation? That occurred directly as a result of the meeting with the students. The reason Dr. LeBlanc was brought into the district was in direct response and a promise to the students that we would do our best to remediate the situation that they found to be untenable and to create an environment that they thought was safe.
Now,
There was no, I'm just saying, there was no overarching or nefarious purpose other than to address their concerns, the students themselves. That was the entire.
We're really talking about two different things at this moment in time. We were trying to solve that problem there, and then all of a sudden, whatever the talk is about CRT was in the background and coming forward, and you're hearing little things here and there.
well, it's all over the country, I mean, it really is.
You know,
It's really is. If you really look at it and do your
I would be-
research,
but I would really be interested in seeing your letter, so if somebody, do you still have it?
I don't know if I do, but I will go back.
and I'm gonna
and
see if
look.
I saved it on
assume-
my computer.
Please,
right.
I'd be very interested
I
in
will,
reading it,
yeah.
as I was interested in reading a letter from another.
And I'm not a guy that looks at Fox News and takes what they said. CNN, Fox, none of that.
No.
I really did a lot of research. We have one guy at the church, Ken, did 40 hours on it. He came back and he was totally saying, nah, it can't be, He came back, he was astonished. He said, you know, this, it's a plan, and it's a plan by well-organized, brilliant people, Harvard grads. This thing, and it's a social, I don't care what anybody says, it's a socialist program that is being put into schools, and I don't want to see it come here.
No, I've all seen that and heard that,
Yeah?
and at this point in time, I don't believe it is in our schools.
Yeah.
In any way, shape, or form. And-
Well, I'm gonna educate myself, I'm gonna do what you said,
And I
and,
have personally asked to be made aware of if there is that going on. So, again, I have asked people,
yeah,
and I've been assured that no, it's not happening. And I gotta
Okay.
take that for face value.
well,
So,
I respect all of you, so I will. You know, it's astonishing to me that more people aren't coming here to you in the community, because I know I talk to people all the time that are aware of this, and they're
you're
saying,
more than welcome to.
yeah, I understand.
Come to me. So,
Yeah.
at this point,
Well, thank you again for my
no,
time.
you're
Thank you.
fine. You're
Thank
fine.
you very much.
Any other public comment?
Is there any other public comment from it? All right, motion to adjourn. Heather, Bill. Thank you.
Sit.
We can have conversations, we're in the community, you
Say
can
again?
contact any one of us.
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote the letter. I was hoping you would read my letter.
You know, honest truth, I didn't ask for it.
Okay, no, I know.
No, I talked to you after.
Absolutely.